Hello, my name's David Cross and I'm a reader in art at UAL. Today I'd like to tell you about some art projects which engage with particular contexts. The context for an artwork can include not just its site or physical setting and its art historical inspirations, but also the social, economic and ecological conditions, and of course the artist's own situation. The first project I'll tell you about was never realised, perhaps because of the relationship of the idea to its context. Since graduating from the Royal College of Art in 1991, I had collaborated with Matthew Cornford as Cornford and Cross. Making critical art projects in public places, we had enjoyed more than our fair share of success. But then came the global financial crisis, which was followed in Britain by a change of government and a political programme of economic austerity. As funding for the arts was withdrawn, our success faltered until our artistic collaboration was no longer viable, and Matthew and I went our separate ways. One day, I was at home trying to make my living room into a studio when the phone rang. It was someone from an arts commissioning agency asking if I'd like to be considered for a new art commission. The themes included art and well-being, ecology and biodiversity, so I was immediately interested. The commission was for a new biomedical campus which was being developed by the University of Cambridge, the Medical Research Council and Addenbrooke's, a world-leading research hospital. So the project partners were internationally respected. And then there was the budget. £350,000? I cleared my diary, updated my CV and wrote an expression of interest. A few weeks later, the commissioners called to say that I was one of only 4 artists shortlisted for the commission. And would I like to attend an interview? I researched and prepared a presentation proposing a new art project linking technology, human health and the planetary ecosystem. On the day of the interview, I took the train to Cambridge and cycled to the biomedical campus, ready to give my presentation. Here it is. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'd like to tell you about my practice of making engaging art in public places. From 1996 to 2014, I worked in artistic collaboration with Matthew Cornford as Cornford and Cross. Today, I'll show you some of our projects that involved people in exploring the different meanings of particular places. Utopia was a site-specific installation for a group exhibition curated by Nigel Prince and Gavin Wade at Bournville near Birmingham. Bournville was established in the 1880s by George Cadbury, a Quaker who wanted to provide an ideal model of business with high-quality housing, health and recreation facilities for the workers in his chocolate factory. This photo from the Cadbury's archive shows the women's recreation ground, which centred on an ornamental pond. By the late 1990s, Cadbury's was an international business preparing to float on the stock market. The ornamental pond was considered then too expensive to maintain, so it had been drained and was to have been filled in, grassed over and forgotten. We rescued the ornamental pond by cleaning it, clearing it, repairing it and laying new stone paving cut to size. We refilled the pond, installed a new fountain and dyed the water with purple food colouring, which was used to make Turkish Delight and rose creams in the Cadbury's chocolate factory. The next work I'll show is titled Jerusalem, and it was made for East International, a contemporary art event curated by Linda Morris in the quietly conservative setting of Norwich, East Anglia. This photo by Deirdre Grierson is from a greetings card in the gift shop of Norwich Cathedral. The cathedral was built during the reign of William the Conqueror with stone brought from Caen in Normandy. As a sculptural intervention into this very English scene, we decided to install a figurative statue. I travelled to a quarry in Caen, Normandy, and had a block of stone cut that would be the plinth for a statue. At the National Rifle Association in Surrey, I went onto the firing range and dug into the sand behind the target butts to gather spent bullets from pistols, rifles and heavy machine guns. We had the bullets melted down to make a lead statue of a boy soldier. On the playing field of an English public school, we installed Jerusalem, a memorial to a war that was yet to happen. The abolition of work was a project commissioned for the new Exchange Gallery in Penzance, Cornwall, the far west of England. Around Cornwall are many historic relics from the days of mining for tin and copper. The main use of copper is as a conduit for water, electricity and telecommunications. The Exchange Gallery is titled after its former use as a telephone exchange, when the building would have been full of copper cabling to carry telephone calls. Copper and tin have also been historically important in coinage as a means of exchange. Today's 1 penny coin was initially minted in 1971 from bronze, an alloy of copper and tin. It's the lowest denomination of currency in the UK, so if you saw one on the pavement, you probably wouldn't pick it up. We cashed in our artist's fee and production budget into 1 penny coins, and with a brilliant team of helpers, we placed them by hand to cover the gallery floor. We titled the piece The Abolition of Work, after a pamphlet written by the anarchist Bob Black, who proposes the complete transformation of society towards a way of life based on play. It Happened Here was a project at the Commandery in Worcester, which was curated by Anne de Charmant of Meadow Arts. In London, outside the House of Commons, stands this statue of Oliver Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell's victory in the English Civil War is celebrated for having laid the foundations of Britain's constitutional system, in which the power of the monarchy is limited by Parliament. Yet Cromwell's military campaign in Ireland was brutally unjust. By taking land from Catholic people and suppressing their legitimate resistance, Cromwell began centuries of trouble, pain and grief. Acknowledging this sorry history, It Happened Here offers a fragment of an alternative vision. Matthew travelled to County Derry in Ulster to buy Irish turf. By using this turf to make an English lawn on a site of historic conflict, we aimed to unsettle established constructions of British national identity and territory. It was here, at the Commandery in Worcester, where Oliver Cromwell's parliamentary forces defeated the Royalists in the last battle of the English Civil War. Our gesture was simply to remove the formal garden and replace it with the turf brought from Northern Ireland. Although landscape and memory are closely bound together, It Happened Here proposes that just as the outcomes of history are complex, neither the acts of erasure nor the codes of commemoration are fixed for all time. These projects all resulted in sculptural installations that presented concepts in symbolic forms. For the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, I proposed a new art project linking technology, human health, and the planetary ecosystem. I began by referring to the work of Gregory Bateson, who was a Fellow of St John's College, Cambridge. Bateson developed systems theory, which recognises the environment as simultaneously natural, technological, and social. Bateson also developed the theory of cybernetic feedback, which connects the different parts of a system so that changes in one part produce changes in the other parts. The Nobel Prize-winning economist Elinor Ostrom studied dynamic, living interactions between social and ecological systems. For the Cambridge Biotechnology campus, I proposed to make a garden as a social space for interaction and collaboration with people from Addenbrooke's Hospital, its research partners, and others, including the Cambridge University Botanical Gardens. For centuries, physic gardens have been meeting places for botanical and medicinal knowledge. My proposal would make a space for people to share cultural knowledges about medicinal plants from around the world. Underlying the social and cultural interactions that happen in a garden are the ecological systems operating at every scale. For example, as an actual process that crosses physical boundaries, pollination could also be a metaphor for creativity and social interaction. Organisms, environments, and ecosystems are rich sources of meaning in every culture. Around the world, the honey bee is a symbol of collaboration, productivity, and well-being. Scientific research is exploring the amazing way that bees navigate, locating their hive in relation to the sun. Bees also communicate precise information about the direction and distance of food sources through what's known as the waggle dance. This dance is a prime example of collective intelligence in social animals, and because it locates places on the ground in relation to the rotation of the Earth around the Sun, the dance connects the local to the planetary scale. A key part of my approach to this commission would be to focus the social and ecological interactions on a sculptural feature in the garden, a long-term structure to house hives of honeybees. This would counterpoint the high-tech architecture and biomedical research with a historical form, connecting nature, technology and society, as in Gregory Bateson's systems theory. For hundreds of years, structures like these hive recesses in a garden wall have sheltered bees from wind and rain and absorbed warmth from the sun, which is radiated back to stabilise the microclimate around the hive. As pollinators, bees are of vital ecological importance in preserving biodiversity. The secret garden, then, would be an immersive environment, engaging all the senses and inviting physical interaction. The first principle in the Constitution of the World Health Organization declares, "Health is a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity." Inspired by that principle, the project would complement an internationally renowned teaching and research hospital in a world-leading centre for biomedical research with a living artwork, a social sculpture at the intersection of nature and culture. When I ended my presentation, there was a warm, positive response from the interview panel, and then I was invited to ask questions or to make any further comments. I hadn't prepared anything, but I said spontaneously that one of the most exciting things about public art projects was that they could bring people together around an aesthetic experience, but also enable critical discussion on matters of vital public importance. There was a moment's hesitation before someone asked, "What kind of matters of public importance did you have in mind?" I said, well, a key question is who benefits from biomedical research? One or two of the panel members looked puzzled. The others just looked blank. But the atmosphere in the room had suddenly cooled, and I realised it was time for me to leave. I wasn't selected for the commission, so I can only imagine how the project might have developed. Because the biomedical campus was reconstructing the relationship between public and private, I wanted the art project to offer a kind of commons. Situated between the hospital and the research centres, with their ethos of instrumental purpose, I wanted art to open a space for thinking more transversally about the relationships between people, plants and animals. While the art project I proposed centred on honeybees in a community garden set in a place of learning and treatment for human health, the surrounding landscape is dominated by industrial agriculture, and a major crop in that area is sugar beet. So one topic for discussion could have been the differences between honey and sugar. It's common knowledge that honey has many benefits for human health, and that bees are essential for pollination of food crops and wild plants. Far less well known is how harmful sugar is to people and the planet. Just one company, British Sugar, produces over 1 million tonnes of sugar from UK sugar beet every year. If that were shared out equally by every British adult, it would be 2/3 more than the World Health Organisation's recommended maximum intake. But it isn't shared out equally. As a cheap source of energy, sugar is disproportionately consumed by people on low incomes, and the damage caused by sugar to human health disproportionately impacts people of colour. Growing sugar beet takes up high-quality farmland that should be used to grow nutritious food, and harvesting sugar beet strips away so much precious topsoil that sugar beet farming, I believe, should be considered as an extractive industry. Sugar beet cultivation involves the use of herbicides, fungicides, and insecticides, including neonicotinoids. Research has linked neonicotinoids to the extermination of bees. Neonicotinoids are poison, so it's no surprise that they also harm human health, causing respiratory, cardiovascular and neurological symptoms, genetic damage and birth defects. I don't know if I could have made the kind of art that the commissioners wanted. For me, the Cambridge Biomedical Campus was more than just a place for a sculptural installation. It was a space for relating embodied experience to wider social, economic and ecological systems. But maybe because it was never realised, I still think about it today in relation to the ideal of planetary health. Now, I'd like to tell you about a work in progress called La joie de vivre. La joie de vivre is a French phrase often used in English to mean a delight in life and in living. Several years ago, I was on holiday in southwest France, where I swam across this lake every day. The air was cool and the water was fresh and clean. In a heavy storm, raindrops hit the lake surface so hard that bubbles of air mixed with droplets of water, and the lake seemed to blend with the sky. But this year, after 2 hot summers and little rainfall, the water was almost gone. What water remained was warm and stale, slippery with algae, and not good to swim in. Actually, it isn't a lake, it's a reservoir, which is filled by diverting rivers from the mountains. Normally, the reservoir serves multiple purposes, including tourism and wildlife. But as the water level drops, the question of who gets to use the water is becoming critical. A steady quantity of water is reserved by the government for cooling a nuclear power station, but the largest part is taken for irrigating crops. The hydrological cycle is a conceptual model of the circulation of water through the processes of evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and filtration. Jamie Linton at Queen's University has critiqued the hydrological cycle as presenting an ideal image which doesn't take account of human interventions, including dams, wells, drainage and irrigation systems, pollution, deforestation and climate breakdown. Linton argues that the reason the hydrological cycle doesn't take account of human interventions is because it, quote, internalises the historical and geographical circumstances in which it was formed, namely a northern temperate society in the throes of modern, state-led industrial development. Perhaps reflecting that worldview, despite the unprecedented heat and drought across Europe this summer, water cannons were throwing water beyond the fields to fall wasted onto the scorching tarmac of the road. In the field beside the road, the ground was so wet it was like liquid clay. I wanted to see where the water came from, so I followed the pipe to a pump which was taking water directly from the river just behind the field. The crop being irrigated was maize, which needs so much water that it really isn't suited to the climate of southern Europe, especially under heat waves and droughts. Maize was cultivated for thousands of years by the indigenous peoples of South America before it was brought to Europe in the 16th century. This mural, painted in 1951 by Diego Rivera, is titled "The Spanish Conquest of the Aztec Nation." Mexican anthropologist Arturo Warman describes how the transatlantic slave trade, colonialism in Africa, and the overthrow of feudalism in Europe were all facilitated by maize cultivation, which produced enough calories to feed a growing population and workforce. Today, most of the maize is used as animal feed, contributing to the vast water consumption that is hidden inside meat and dairy products. In this small town in southwest France, there is little discussion of the ecological impacts of plantation monoculture and intensive livestock production, much less of how colonialism has shaped the land. Few people even seem to notice that the level of water in the river is extremely low. And no one wants to talk about the fact that the river Chalabre, from which the town of Chalabre takes its name, has dried up completely. The public space overlooking the river is a tranquil spot where people relax and play. I propose to install an agricultural water cannon to project a jet of water 50 metres upstream before it falls back into the river on its way from the mountains to the sea. While drawing on the tradition of fountains as a form of public art, La Joie de Vivre will stage an artificial loop in the hydrological cycle. To make this happen, I'll either need to borrow a tractor from a local farmer or hire an industrial pump. And I'll need to hire a water cannon from this agricultural cooperative, which stocks grain and fertiliser and supplies irrigation equipment to the whole region. Meanwhile, I made a video study for the physical installation which I plan to realise soon. Looking for somewhere to show the video, I chose the former abattoir, which is now a public meeting room facing the area overlooking the river. The space is used for meetings and activities, from yoga classes to local art exhibitions. But where exactly in this space could I show it? I noticed the kitchen area at the back of the hall. With a handy storage space, microwave oven, sink and freezer, it has everything for French cuisine. By displaying my video on an LCD screen in this kitchen area of the former abattoir, I engaged with the space as a context in which to reconnect food and farming to the land and the water that flows through it. The artistic context is defined by Marcel Duchamp's Fountain of 1917, which established the principle of the ready-made art object. The artistic context is also influenced by the Danish artist Tue Greenfort, whose installation Diffuse Entries of 2007 connected with the ecological environment of the Münster Sculpture Project. To connect the contexts of contemporary visual culture with consumer culture, I used a large domestic video screen, which I bought from an edge-of-town retail store. Perhaps to appeal to the widest possible public, or customer base, TV screens in showrooms like this often play fantastic images of pristine nature. The scene is a sunlit rural landscape, which is repeatedly drenched in a downpour that might resemble the artificial rain of Hollywood films. Or maybe a firefighting spray. Or perhaps even a police water cannon. The video was recorded on the 23rd of August 2023, the hottest day of the hottest summer globally since records began. I set the video to play as a loop to evoke the calming idea of an endlessly healing cycle of nature. But perhaps its simulated eternity might evoke the growing anxiety that the consumer society is destroying the ecosystem that sustains all life on Earth. La Joie de Vivre is the title of the celebrated novel by the French writer Émile Zola, who explores the influences of biology and society on people as they pursue happiness and fulfillment amidst the struggles of everyday life.